Dignity in All Human Conditions, a capability-based approach to measuring poverty through the Supplementary Poverty Measure, by Caitlin Barnes and Hannah Puckett. We hope you learn a lot from this video, but the two most important points are how we should define poverty and how we should measure it in practice. We propose that poverty should be defined as the deprivation of necessary economic resources to fulfill central capabilities, which inherently prevents one from fully functioning in society. And we believe that it should be measured using the Supplementary Poverty Measure, which encompasses key aspects of Nussbaum's central capabilities, as we will touch on more later. If someone asked you right now, what does a poor person look like? What sort of images come to mind? Various generalizations and stereotypes may come to mind. Do you see a homeless person, someone at a soup kitchen, a single mother, an unemployed individual? These stereotypes may be misleading of the actual poor in the U.S. While there are certainly poor people falling within these stereotypes, the reality of the situation is that people of various living arrangements, races, ages, sexualities, genders, and professions are poor, as defined by the official poverty measure, or OPM. Our point is that poverty has no one-size-fits-all image. Here are just a few interesting statistics from the 2007 Current Population Survey about the demographics of poverty in America. These statistics help break down some of the stereotypes associated with poverty that we mentioned previously. For such people living in poverty, we believe that the primary purpose behind all efforts to understand, measure, and limit poverty is to maintain the dignity of every person. To do so, in our opinion, means ensuring that there are no barriers to social inclusion for any individual, and that every person has the central capabilities that allow them to express their autonomy. Thus, every purpose of poverty study should serve to shape perceptions and policies that help raise the poor to a standard of living that is representative of every human's inherent dignity. To achieve these goals, we must first clearly define poverty. When asked, "What is poverty?" our family members and friends responded with various definitions, including homelessness, due to lack of education and employment, and a lack of basic material needs. We already know that some of these definitions are perhaps misleading or inaccurate after exploring the many faces of poverty. Robert Rector, a leading expert on poverty, talked a lot about the sensationalism, exaggeration, and misinformation surrounding poverty, and how the public's misconceptions of poverty are heavily influenced by the media and even some politicians.
Before we dive into how we would define poverty, let's take a closer look at the idea of poverty as a lack of material needs.
The current official poverty measure, called the OPM, defines poverty according to materialistic needs and economic resources. As John Iceland discusses, the OPM takes into account a household's gross annual pre-tax income and cash benefits when measuring poverty. The household is said to be in poverty when their gross annual pre-tax income falls below the federal poverty line. This threshold, the federal poverty line, was created by Molly Orshansky, who multiplied the costs of the Economy Food Plan, a highly restrictive meal plan, by 3 to achieve this threshold. Molly Orshansky based this threshold on the information that families of 3 or more people in 1955 spent 1/3 of their gross after-tax income on food in the 1955 Household Food Consumption Survey. Robert Rector, a leading presence in poverty studies, also implicitly disagrees with the OPM as an appropriate measure for poverty. He has found through his studies that the OPM-defined poor are better off than the public perceives them to be. thus creating a society in which poverty is misunderstood and, in his implicit belief, misaddressed. He defines poverty as significant material deprivation through his research on the various amenities that the OPM-classified poor possess. Let's view Rector's argument critically and charitably, beginning with the strengths of Rector's argument. His intensive research serves to clarify the poverty condition in the U.S., allowing for the public to understand poverty in more complete terms. Rector dispels common misconceptions about poverty, instead highlighting the true condition of America's poor, which allows for a more nuanced approach to poverty in the U.S. The other strength in Rector's argument is his criticism of the OPM. It is clear that the OPM vastly misrepresents poverty and contributes to common misconceptions. Rector's disagreement with the OPM is entirely valid in our view, and the main strength of his argument. However, Rector's definition also implicates various issues with great ramifications. Primarily, Rector underestimates the relative aspect of poverty, that to live a truly dignified life in a society like the U.S., standards of living may go beyond basic subsistence needs like food and water. If the focus and underlying motivation of poverty studies is to establish and ensure human dignity for all, then dignity implicates needs beyond what is necessary for survival. Thus, Rector's definition fails to consider human dignity for the poor and is therefore not an appropriate definition or measure of poverty. On the other hand, the capability approach, another method of defining poverty as developed by Amartya Sen, is built upon the central theme of establishing human dignity. This approach argues that not only are needs like nourishment, shelter, social inclusion, health, and cognitive development key to establishing standards of living that are appropriate for beings of dignity like humans, but that the freedom to choose one's functionings is essential to maintaining dignity. To fully understand capabilities, it is important to understand exactly what is meant by the term functionings. Functionings, as defined by Sen, are the beings and doings of life. Capabilities are then defined as the total possible combinations of functionings and choices that an individual has at his disposal. An individual's capabilities are often influenced by their economic resources, as money is instrumentally valuable. This means that money functions as a means to achieve certain functionings that then make up an individual's total capability. By Sen's definition, poverty is a lack of capabilities that deprives an individual of dignity. But how do we decide which capabilities are important for maintaining a dignified life? Martha Nussbaum proposes an answer to that question through her list of the 10 central capabilities. These central capabilities are the capabilities that Nussbaum deems necessary for a human life of dignity. An example of one of Nussbaum's central capabilities is play, the ability to laugh and engage in the enjoyment of life. These 10 capabilities define in rather holistic terms what it is to live a life of dignity. As such, we find that Nussbaum's 10 central capabilities are an important aspect to understanding and defining poverty, as we are primarily concerned with the establishment of human dignity for the poor. However, due to the incredible subjectivity of capabilities, it can become rather difficult to use the capability approach as a standard poverty measure. Thus, we turn to the SPM to provide a near measure of capabilities, because it includes a measurement of the population's functionings within central capabilities that allows for a close measure of the overall population's true capabilities. The supplemental poverty measure combines the relative aspects of the capabilities approach with the relatively absolute nature of the OPM. The SPM is favorable because it includes factors like food stamps, housing subsidies, low-income energy assistance, tax credits, and other in-kind and near-cash benefits in its calculation. Moreover, it also accounts for a multitude of expenses that are excluded from the OPM, such as taxes, work expenses, child care, medical out-of-pocket expenses, and other non-discretionary expenses. The SPM threshold is calculated as the combination of facilities, clothing, shelter, and utilities expenses for a household at the 33rd percentile of the expenditure distribution multiplied by 1.2. This threshold accounts for the functionings and discretion necessary for maintaining a life of human dignity while adapting to changing standards of living. Thus, the SPM achieves the goal of measuring poverty in humane and dignified terms because it closely represents capabilities through its inclusion of multiple facets of an individual's well-being. Due to the capability approach's ability to consider human dignity holistically, we believe that poverty should be defined according to this approach. Thus, our definition of poverty is a deprivation of necessary economic resources to fulfill central capabilities, which inherently prevents one from fully functioning in society. These central capabilities are defined as Martha Nussbaum's 10 central capabilities, discussed earlier in the video. While the capabilities approach to defining and measuring poverty is the best approach for ensuring human dignity for all individuals, its extremely relative and time-consuming nature make it difficult to apply capabilities directly as a means of measuring poverty. Therefore, we argue that the appropriate measurement of poverty should be a capabilities-based analysis of the SPM. This means that we believe capabilities should inform and define the perception and analyzation of the SPM. Because the SPM includes benefits and expenses that implicate many of Nussbaum's central capabilities, it can be used as a near measure of one's capabilities. For example, the SPM's inclusion of medical out-of-pocket expenses in its calculation infers the central capability of bodily health. Thus, in order to maintain the underpinning of human dignity in the measurement and definition of poverty, the capabilities approach should be utilized as the basis for SPM analysis, which can measure poverty in a more time and resource-efficient calculation. However, poverty should be defined by the capabilities approach as a lack of central capabilities.
Thank you so much for watching our video. We really hope you learned something new and can go away, talk to others, and learn even more about this incredibly important topic.